Elliotts Friedman has dropped a major trade update on Trent Frederic and revealed who may be involved, and the Bruins are getting many calls for Trent Frederic. We're going to be talking about in this video who is now the leading candidate to trade for Trent Frederic here at the NHL trade deadline. Before we get into this video, though, we're on the road to 6K, and we know that just over 70% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for a spot for all of your Boston Bruins news, you're in the right spot. Hit the sub button. Join me here on the channel. We are covering everything Boston Bruins. Without any further ado, though, let's get into our first screenshot here of the video detailing what Elliotts Friedman had to say about the possible Trent Frederic trade. He says, I've started hearing a bit more Trent Frederic noise. I think they're going through their options there. That's definitely going on. So, Elliotts Friedman's revealed that now there are more and more teams looking at Trent Frederic, as he reported beforehand, before all of this, that Trent Frederic was one of the top candidates. Teams have been calling the Boston Bruins on him, but now he's starting to hear more of this noise. And as we get closer to the NHL trade deadline, just under 2 weeks away, many people are going to be looking for these depth centers, these depth forwards that are going to put them into a playoff spot. And we know the Boston Bruins are not that team. We know the Boston Bruins are not going to be that playoff spot, and Trent Frederic was likely to be the forward traded, whether or not they were in a playoff spot. Going on a free agency year and obviously not performing up to the standards that we had hoped he would have had this year and really not living up to what he did last year, he's still putting up some decent numbers, especially when it does come to a bottom six role. And when it does come to, a bottom six, and especially on a team where he don't need to be a leading candidate in scoring on that team, he is certainly leading that aspect for many teams and probably going to be the top center for many teams when it does come down to the NHL trade deadline. And being 27, being on a free agent, or being a free agent where the possibility of re-signing is always there, that's a good thing for a lot of teams. And a lot of teams are going to be looking for that in-house free agency move that they can get at the trade deadline. Now, there is a bit of a concerning factor when this all comes down to it. Now it comes to the last game where Trent Frederic left the game and did not return after a hit from Jake McCabe. And looking at, the screenshots that we had from Ty Anderson, from Connor Ryan, whoever it may be, who was in that Bruins locker room kind of going over what Joe Sacco had to say, there was no update on Trent Frederic after the game. And that's not what you wanted to hear for your top trade candidate, especially if you're the Boston Bruins, who are going to have to make quite a few moves and who had quite a few scouts at last game, presumably looking at Trent Frederic in specific as most certainly one of the forwards. Now, the injury is not something that we wanted to hear, obviously, and hopefully we are going to get some more information on that over the coming days with Trent Frederic, but the hit ultimately, just straight up injured Trent Frederic, and it does, be a bit concerning where we don't see him come back. Now, whether the Bruins chose to not bring him back because of, not wanting to risk a re-injury, because of, a potential protocol that kept him out, there was really no information on it, as you see Ty Anderson here, no update at all from Trent Frederic, and still none at the point of recording this video. But we have to look at the fact that he still is going to be eventually and hopefully traded. But the big concerning part of this regarding a trade regarding Trent Frederic is that a lot of teams may be hesitant now with this specific injury to trade, as a week and a half now we have until the deadline about, and teams are going to be looking for these healthy guys that can come in, fill in a spot immediately, whether it is due to an injury on that side of things already or just to fill in that depth. And when we're looking at this tweet here, I thought this was a very, very good kind of concept to bring up when we're looking at Trent Frederic and an injury. The Trent Frederic injury is an asset management at its finest. The worst part is now you have to play him or get him back on the ice as soon as possible because teams are going to want to see if he's okay. Just a disaster for the Boston Bruins. And although I do agree with this, I don't think that we need to necessarily rush him out. I think a lot of teams have been able to see what Trent Frederic can bring over the past few seasons and this season as well. However, a lot of teams are going to want to see him back on the ice and make sure that this is not an injury that will cause any further complications on their season, on their, future, and especially the assets that they may give up for Trent Frederic, as he will command quite a bit, and hopefully it is as much as possible for the sake of the Boston Bruins. But it is going to be a bit of a concerning aspect for teams that have already kind of put their name out there for wanting Trent Frederic or maybe have been in contact and now maybe stepping away. That's going to lower the value, ultimately, needing him to be back on the ice to prove to teams that he'll be back there this season, he'll be back next game, and it was just an uncomfortable hit. But one team in specific who may be willing to take that risk is the Minnesota Wild. Now, this is the third video that I've made on Trent Frederic in a Minnesota Wild jersey in the thumbnail. And from the first one, he has been the leading candidate in my opinion, and according to a few sportsbooks as well, for the Minnesota Wild to get Trent Frederic in a trade, and especially after the injury which occurred to Joel Eriksson, who was reported to be out for quite a bit of time and, is going on the IR, but ultimately could be moved to the LTIR. Here's what we have from Michael Russo regarding that. Bad Minnesota Wild news. Center Joel Eriksson was injured in practice yesterday and has been placed on injury reserve. Must miss at least 7 days or 4 games, but here he's going to be out a lot longer. And Jacob Lauko was activated off the IR to replace him, but obviously, the Minnesota Wild are in a better position than the Boston Bruins, and when we're looking at their kind of outcome this season, they've had Kirill Kaprizov injured for majority of the season. Joel Eriksson has been out already as well, and now scheduled to miss more time. They're going to want to add some big assets which is possible, and of course now where we've been able to see this team be one of the worst salary situations in the NHL ever over the past few years, especially with the buyouts specifically of Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. And now having the ability to make a move where you can spend that money and those contracts being off the books next season, there's a lot of possibilities the Minnesota Wild spend big here. And Trent Frederic is certainly going to be one of those. And when we look at the offense for this Minnesota Wild team, they are not deep at all at center. Marco Rossi is certainly one guy who's been excelling this year and surprising a lot of people. But apart from that, I don't really see any centerman on this team that could really solidify and lock down a second, third, or even fourth line. And we know that Trent Frederic can play center, can play on the wing, and I think it's a big thing the Minnesota Wild and many other teams in specific would love to see as a center and a winger who can really play both sides of the puck, and Trent Frederic is that. And also pairing him with Marcus Foligno, 2 physical guys, I think that would be an excellent line. I may or not be bargaining this chip here for the Boston Bruins for the Minnesota Wild to take Trent Frederic, but it does seem like this is a match made in heaven at this point for both of these teams. And as we kind of look at the cap situation, as I mentioned, $9 million in cap space right now for the Minnesota Wild. That is still with Joel Eriksson's contract on the book. So if he goes on LTIR, that contract will be moved to the LTIR pool and will up the cap space to about $14 million, I think. The contract's $5.25 million. So when you pair that with Kirill Kaprizov's $9 million on the LTIR right now, they have a lot of money to spend. Although, depends on when things happen. They could pull a Vegas Golden Knights come the playoffs. But I do think that when we're looking at Trent Frederic and when we're looking at the Minnesota Wild, I think that these two are the very, very likely options. I think that the Minnesota Wild will certainly want to have their piece of the pie with Trent Frederic here, and the deadline's approaching. Elliotts Friedman had this to say, so I do think that the Minnesota Wild are one of these teams, no doubt in my mind, and now more than ever, especially with their whole situation at injury, I guess, whatever we can say about that. So it's very interesting to take a look at this. And as more reports come out over the next few days, I'll be having it all here, and we're going to see what the Minnesota Wild plan to do here with the Boston Bruins. And they were one of the scouts, I believe, at that game against the Toronto Maple Leafs there. So many teams are looking at the Boston Bruins, but one team in specific to watch is the Minnesota Wild. So let me know what you think about this. Obviously, we're going to see some trades soon. The Bruins may not be engaging in too many, but they're certainly going to be asked for quite a bit, here at this deadline. So if you want to get all your Boston Bruins news, you're in the right spot. Be sure to hit the sub button. I'll be keeping you guys up to date with all of it. But that's all I got here in this video. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. But I'm signing out. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.